Alright, YouTube. Mjolnir Man here, and I'm back. I know I've been gone for the better part of 2 days now, but it is what it is. I've been writing my book, job searching as well, and I thought what better to do than to make a video about ghosts again, but I'm not going to be discussing theories or whatever. I'm actually going to take a step back and look at this from a historical perspective, or talk about it from a historical perspective. Now, there's a rich and broad history of ghosts in human history, but I feel little people know about it. But if you start to piece it together, it looks very straightforward and simple. I'm kind of going to go over a couple cultures and then kind of go and talk about the Christianization and modernity in terms of ghosts. So like different pre-Christian cultures, then Christianity's view on it, then the modern spew on it. So there's a lot of, if you have researched pagan and other groups around the world, there's a lot of festivities surrounding ghosts. You have the Celts celebrating Samhain. You have a Chinese holiday similar in construction. They'll leave food out for the ghosts to try to please them, because the Chinese kind of viewed ghosts as people that would hinder progress of the physical realm. Usually in ancient times, ghosts were seen as a bad thing. Seeing ghosts was a sign of terrible news, and they believed a ghost would be an ancestor or a family member who wasn't properly buried. So this is why we get different traditions of burials and funeral rites. You have, some cultures that would burn bodies on a pike fire, like down in the Tibet and Indian regions of the world. And once you kind of get into the ancient Greek sphere, they would put coins in the dead's mouth, the corpse's mouth, because they thought they would be able to take that with them to the afterlife. And once they got into the afterlife, they would be able to pay some deity to, or pay a toll to a deity to take them across the river Styx. Not Styx as in a pile of sticks, as in decaying branches, but Styx like the band Styx, S-T-Y-X. The Celts celebrated Samhain, which we later turned into Halloween. And what they did is that they would prepare meals in their homes for the ghosts of the people they formerly enjoyed the company of. But this concept of putting masks on and costumes on was a way to conceal their identities from people who have passed on. What the concept was, basically, is that they were trying to mask themselves from the ghosts of people they may have had major disagreements with or didn't like, because the commonly held belief was that these people that would come back as ghosts would essentially come back and harm the person. So they would wear costumes to kind of misidentify themselves, or not be able to be identified in general. The Mesoamericans have a weird take on it, and they had kind of a unique take on it. They didn't view ghosts as the departed souls or some type of waste product of someone that was once living. They viewed them as terrible, gross demons that needed to be kept at bay. They would wear special amulets, and they would also hire the services of shamans. I think they're also called as day keepers, also known as day keepers. And what they would do is essentially wear these amulets, and the shamans would perform different services in order to keep these spirits at bay. I believe it was the Mayas and the Mayans that believed that once you died, you would be tricked, because they had to travel to paradise. They didn't just get granted access. They had to go and travel into paradise. But what would happen is that these evil spirits, I think it's called Hebalb, is this plane of existence that's kind of similar to hell in the modern sense. And what would happen is that these spirits in Hebalb would trick people who have deceased and basically torture them, antagonize them, etc. What's interesting in China is that they feel if a person didn't get a proper burial, their spirits would look significantly human. It was basically if they were not given a proper burial, or they died in a way that would prevent them from being buried in the first place. So if someone died in battle, or if someone was, died in the forest of malnourishment, or was attacked by an animal and was never found, essentially, they believed what would happen is the ghost would take on a more physical, human-looking form, and it would only be able to be seen at night by light of a torch. Confucius himself believed in ghosts. He believed that they could teach lessons to the living and instill great virtues. And I believe Moti believed that a ghost of a former minister, I can't remember the name, but he killed the king of Zhou. So he believed the ghost of a Chinese minister had come and killed a king, assassinated a king, essentially. And back on the Mesoamericans, now that I think of it, a lot of Mesoamerican cultures have a bleak view of the afterlife. I believe there was a tribe which essentially believed that after you died, you would fly around and be reincarnated in this really dark plane as a specific type of moth for about 1,000 years. Then afterwards, you would just cease existing. So a rather mundane, dreary, kind of depressing outlook on the afterlife. Now in Europe, ghosts were seen as bad things, but sometimes it was believed that if they were seen in dreams, and I believe China, or ancient Chinese cultures, also upheld this belief. If ancestors were seen in dreams, they were benevolent ghosts. They weren't just a part of a dream. They were actually a ghost trying to convey a serious message or a warning onto someone. So they were seen in Europe as sort of this dual, if they're in the dream, they're a good being. If they're in person, it's a bad sign. This person's unhappy with their afterlife or is pissed off because they never got a proper burial. And that's where, like I said before, a lot of funeral services kind of kick-started because it was believed that they would look down and smile and essentially not bother the physical world anymore. Now, obviously, this view of ghosts had started to shift in late antiquity, shifting into the early Iron Age. This is a period of time historians... Sorry, there's something in my eye. I think an eyelash came loose. Historians label this time the Christianization of Europe. And in its first couple of centuries, I think the first 5 centuries, the Catholic Church did permit the belief and even the theory of ghosts coming back into the physical realm and intervening with mortal life. But they did not see this as the afterlife, of course. They believed these to be the souls of people who didn't really go anywhere. They're kind of trapped in this matrix, I guess you could say. So they would beg essentially to be cleansed of their sins, or at least be allowed a chance in purgatory to be awaiting judgment. Ooh, hiccup. What happened after that is the Protestants then said, this isn't right at all. Why would God not judge a group of people? These are obviously demons masquerading around as loved ones to try to lure mortals into a false sense of friendship or security so they can tempt them or torture them or kill them, what have you. And this kind of belief was carried into, and especially under King James I's rule, this was cemented as he was seen as a paranoid man most of the time, claiming to see acts of demonic possession or demons basically causing havoc and mayhem everywhere he looked. And a part of me says that he used this as kind of a crutch for his political shortcomings, saying, oh, the demons did it. It was obviously the demons. But the other side of me says maybe he just really was this batshit insane. And he then outlawed any spiritual services that weren't originating from the church. And he also banned ghosts. I don't know how you ban ghosts that didn't originate from the church. He said anything of the supernatural that wasn't occurring from the church was obviously an act of semen. Was obviously an act of Satan. And this is also an interesting topic. We're talking about before the Protestants kind of grew in numbers, this was starting to happen at the latter days of the Catholic Church's rule. During the plague, people, after they kind of had established that these weren't ghosts of former ancestors, these were malevolent demons hell-bent on killing people, they would blame things like the Black Plague or the bubonic plague on these demons. If you were to say, oh, you have a disease, these people would probably look at you and ask, what the fuck is a disease? Is that the name of the demon who's been infecting the village? And then they would have the priests come out, or maybe, if it was that one witch doctor who was lucky enough to make a deal with the church because he was actually saving the people using herbal remedies and stuff, that would come and cast out the demon of disease, or by the name of disease, out of the village. This is what would have happened. And then, as we get to the rational era, the 1700s, the 18th century essentially, where these ideas of rationalism and scientific findings were starting to be more favored, and secular ideologies were more favored than the classic church rule, a lot of these views and these manifestations of spirits and so on were seen heavily as folklore and superstition and stupid. And they were matched with intense skepticism. And it wasn't until about a century later in Europe, in the 19th century, the 1800s, where I guess you could say the cogs started turning again. The engine was turned on once more, and there were small esoteric circles talking about ghosts and their own findings, and they would publish ghost books. And it was basically popularized by a small esoteric group known by the name of Spiritism. They were a Christian group. They did believe in God. They did believe in His teachings. But they had a lot of focus on ghosts, the paranormal, and even believed that Jesus Christ Himself was a ghost. It would basically be like Freemasonry centered around ghosts, minus the ritualism. And now in modernity, in the modern age, you kind of get these, I mean, we've basically seen before our eyes a complete and utter commercial success of the topics of ghosts and the paranormal. You know, we see the ghost hunters shows, we see the ghost stories, you know, the old campfire stories to spook the little ones, TV shows. And even, you know, entire movies centered around the topic of, oh, this ghost can kill someone, or poltergeists, or any other sort of thing you can imagine. And I think, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. In one sense, it's bringing a lot of awareness to the topic of ghosts. But in another hand, it's instilling this, you know, fearful state, you know, this ghost can come out and kill me, they're demons. It's kind of the same sentiment the Protestants held centuries ago. But, and it's kind of funny because there's still a subset of the Protestant movement today which still believes ghosts are like these demonic beings which are evil creatures who would basically trick people. But we're seeing, you know, this modernization and Hollywoodization of ghosts today as these weird, supernatural, omnipresent beings which can throw objects at people, kill people, harm people, haunt them in their dreams, and it's creating kind of this Hollywood hysteria, as I like to coin it. It's the same thing they did with occult circles and Satanists back in the 80s. They made the whole movement seem like they were sacrificing kittens and children, which is not the case. And it's not the case that these ghosts are going to come out and kill you and torture you in the present day. We've seen it with the concept of zombies and vampires, and now we're seeing it with ghosts. So, that's about it, YouTube. I hope you like this video. If you're new to this channel, subscribe. I have plenty of videos on ghosts and the paranormal. Peace out.